This was a very fun episode to do. I'm very excited to share this one with you guys. I brought in a very special guest. This is the first time we had a guest as part of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Show, which, of course, is derived directly from our host network, the Old Man Squad Fantasy Network. Thank you, as always, Dan, for allowing me to have a show on your network and to kind of just bite off your name and just change it just a little bit. It's always takes me a while when if I want to come up with a new name for a show. And as fun as it is, it was a lot easier to just take it directly from yours. So thank you. And yeah, obviously we're talking about a lot of the younger players. We're diving into the dynasty prospects, the players that aren't really going to be drafted in your redraft leagues, your single season leagues. Maybe they are sometimes. We'll talk about those guys too. But some of these guys that are going under the radar that maybe you haven't even heard of. We're going to dive into them. Not necessarily with this episode, but that's what this show's for. I'm getting off track a little bit before I bring in Rhett to talk about some of the rookies from this past class. We talked about just a few guys that made us think, a few teams that made us think. We drew conclusions as we were discussing these players and teams and how to operate in dynasty leagues with all of these rebuilding teams, or just in fantasy in general with all of these rebuilding teams. And excuse me, we waded into barely briefly discussing the 2025 class, more so how these rotations and these young players are impacted if their team lucks out in the lottery. And then you're adding in Cooper Flagg, you're adding in Dylan Harper. And where does the team go from there after that? Before I bring in Rhett, I just want to remind you guys that Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and our partner. And your number one source for all of your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing and has been going on for a little bit. We're into the NBA and NHL playoffs. We are locked into the NBA playoffs here. That's what we're diving into every single night, just keeping up with everything. That's why we make fantasy basketball content, because we love keeping up with the NBA. I don't think that's a big secret or anything like that. So that's really cool. But it's always fun to see basketball at the highest level. The regular season is a ton of fun. I think sometimes gets overhated on, but there is no denying that everybody steps up their game for the postseason. Some more so than others, to the point where they get a nickname based off of it. Shout out to Playoff Jimmy. But Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores. Even live in-game betting while the games are being played, with the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB to the NHL to the UFC. BetOnline remains the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. In between these games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas style games, including poker, just a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Let's get into the dynasty part of this. Rhett, thank you so much for joining me. You are the first official guest on the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. How are you?
I am doing great. Honored to be here for sure. Young man squad for a dynasty lean. I love that. Excited to see you and Dan work together. Just always here to support Dan and everything he does. So glad that now you're in that sphere as well. Let's get after it.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I had, even before I talked to him, I told him this. I was like, I'd kind of been thinking about like starting a dynasty show, just taking away from the name Young Man Squad. Of course, it's punny. Dan ate it up, loved it immediately. So we were on board with that right then and there. So that worked out really well. Let's get into it. I think today we are just going to be talking about the 2024 rookie class and some of the surprising players, the intriguing players, the really good, the really bad, everything in between. We will talk about them for like 30 minutes, see how many we get through. I have no idea how many we'll get through, but we'll see. But I want to start with uh, the Hawks rookie, the number one overall pick. I think it's a very intriguing topic. Um, so Zachary Risachet is the first player that I want to talk about here. Like I said, number one overall pick, a guy that I was very against the Hawks drafting. I was like anybody but Risachet. There was a little bit of hope for me right before, like 30 minutes before the draft. They're saying, "Hey, it's Risachet or Reed Shepard," and I was like, "I love Reed Shepard," and so was very against this pick. But as the season has gone on, he's looked much better. I think he's fitting in very well. He's clearly gotten better since day one. Just with his recent production, like you can see it on the court. He looks more comfortable. He's getting stronger. I think if we're going to look back and say, okay, like, was he number one overall pick? Was he, did he meet the expectations? Probably not. But I think he has a very bright future to be a long term NBA player.
Yeah, I think and it's so strange because after you mentioned what the topic would be, um, I don't know if it was earlier today or yesterday, I started thinking, I was like, okay, who has been the most intriguing, but then who's been the most disappointing? And I felt like for the most part, this entire draft class hasn't really been that disappointing.
Hmm.
And yet, the does that say something about the expectations that we had for them? I'm not really sure. But like Risa Shea is a perfect embodiment of that, where he shot 45% from the field, 36% from three, 71% from the line. Like that's okay. That's pretty all right for a rookie. Like, yeah, I know that Jason and I, shout out Jason on the Dynasty community. We were going back and forth on Risa Shea just because it's like, well, he's really only hitting shots if Trey passes him the ball. It's like, well, that's kind of his role, anyways.
Yeah.
Like that's what it's going to be as long as Trey is on the team. So I don't really, I don't really know what to make of him as anything other than just like an NBA rotation player. But the progress is there, and I don't think that. I mean, maybe the Hawks saw something that a lot of people didn't. I don't know if star was really there for Risa Shea in the draft profile. I don't know if the expectation was quite there for that, but solid. Like I think he's going to do a lot of different stuff. I kind of feel like it's a like a Michael Porter Jr. Tobias
Hmm.
Harris type world, uh,
Mm.
because I feel like MPJ he I think Risa Shea has a little bit more juice with the ball than MPJ does, like potential at least as far as ball handling and vision.
Hmm.
But I also just I think MPJ has been the comp for so long that I was trying to find something a bit different. But as the resident Hawks fan, how do you feel about Risa Shea as like a a piece next to Trey Young, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, and whoever the starting center is next season? It's probably still Clint Capella, yeah.
Oh my gosh. If it's Clint Capella, if it's Clint Capella, I'm gonna have a 2 hour long rant on this show. Like I guarantee you right now, if they because he's an unrestricted free agent, if they
Yep,
re-sign him and give him the starting job,
yep.
2 hour rant will be coming. I guarantee it.
Go ahead and
Go ahead
book
and
it
mark your
late
calendars.
October,
Go ahead
y'all.
and
You
mark your
bring it.
calendars. That's insane. Anyways, I think Risa Shea fits in really well alongside what they're trying to build. They're trying to add a lot of long defenders next to Trey Young. And I think Risa Shea has been a better defender than I was expecting him to be. The shot started slow, got better as the season went on. And like you said, like if he's hitting shots when Trey passes him the ball, that is his role. He's shown a couple things. He has these plays every once in a while where I think he did like a little wraparound dribble for one play that was kind of a little highlight there. He's been like oddly good at this little left-handed hook, and he's got pretty good footwork in the like. It's these like things that I don't know. You're not really wanting him to be very very good at, but he shows enough flashes where you're like, hey, like maybe that's something that he could end up being, which I think is like the quote unquote star flashes. I don't think
Yeah,
he's going to be an all-star talent,
yeah.
but I think he's going to be a really good player for a number of years. I think he just fits in really well with what the Hawks are trying. I think if he was on like a tanking team, he would probably have looked even worse this year. I think it
Wizards.
definitely helped. Yeah, if he was on the Wizards and he was having to shoot, I don't know, 15, 18 shots a game as the number one or number two overall pick or whatever it would have been, like he wouldn't
Yep.
have looked as good as he did. So I'm I think you mentioned the MPJ Cup. I think the idea, and this is never anything he's gonna reach, was that he was gonna be like 6'10 Clay Thompson. Which
Oh, no
obviously,
chance.
yeah, I mean, like
On either side
that's
of the
the kind
ball.
of thing. Yeah. I think it's the idea of it is like he's a really good catch and shoot player that can
Yeah.
play both sides of the ball. And so it's like Clay Thompson archetype. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think the automatically saying, yeah, guys, Clay Thompson, but taller, and you're talking about a Hall of Famer that's one of the greatest shooters of all time. Like, yeah, obviously he's not gonna reach that, but But if he
Maybe
does,
taller
I'll be
Malik Beasley.
happy.
How about that?
Taller Malik Beasley. That would not
This
be a
year,
good
that's a
number one overall
compliment.
pick. That is a compliment this year, but if you just said that any other year, it'd have been the worst number one overall pick in history. All right.
Yeah.
We can talk about somebody else. Where do you want to go next? Is there anybody in particular that you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the guy that I thought would be the best player in the draft, and that is Steph Castle. I don't know that I would have taken him number one overall. I probably would have taken Sar just because that archetype of maybe being a stretch big, maybe being like a 3 and D big, playing both ways that's just the most, besides the superstar, the most valuable archetype. But I loved Steph Castle as a, like, it was some sort of hybrid between like Jimmy Butler, Josh Hart type of deal, like somewhere
Mm,
between that round. And I think that we've already seen Josh Hart from Castle this year. Like, obviously not triple double Josh Hart, but 27 minutes a game, 15, 4 and 4. I mean, that's, I don't know how you're going to expect much more from a guy that, he got to play with Chris Paul, which is a huge deal. He got to play with Wemby, which makes his life a whole lot easier. But in the same vein as Ricochet, he made all the shots that Trey passed him. It was like, well, Steph played off of Wemby. That is the future. That
hmm
is going to be Steph Castle's job. And I'm curious to see what you think about Steph Castle and his season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can pretty much go ahead and write him in as rookie of the year. Um,
Yep.
I think probably wasn't the best fantasy rookie, but as far as just real life, like I think he's going to win rookie of the year.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple other guys that have a case, but Castle probably was the best rookie. I think I'm interested to see how he progresses and fits over the next few years because this is a
Yeah.
team that's going to be ready to make the postseason next year. Like they have De'Aaron Fox, they have Victor Wembanyama. They'll
Hmm.
have their own pick if the Hawks. I mean, by the time this comes out, we'll know for sure. But if they end up bottoming out in the play-in tournament and have a lottery pick, that's another lottery pick right there. But at
Yeah.
least like around top 15ish. So I'm not exactly sure how he fits into the future. It's into the rotation starting next season. But as far as this year, he was much better than I was expecting. He was a player that I really liked. I think I had him number 2 or number 3 on my board before the draft. Not for
Hmm.
fantasy, just for
Yeah.
like real life because I didn't think it was going to translate all that well. But it translated a little bit better than I was expecting it to. Um, Not a great shooter, but I think showed a little bit more there than maybe he was expected to in year one.
Hmm.
And I think, down the stretch, he really did kind of benefit a little bit as far as how many points he was scoring when with Wemby out, with De'Aaron Fox out. He had a really strong finish this season. Was already playing well before that. So I it's hard for me to exactly say how this rookie year translates to the future because yes, he got the chance to shine a little bit, but when this team's fully healthy, and I can't imagine that they're just gonna not make any moves because you have
Yeah.
Fox and Wemby to build around. Like, let's try and get a couple other players in here that can help them win a championship or start to progress to winning a championship within the next couple of years. So does that kind of push Castle to a reserve role? I'm not entirely sure, but to wrap that up, I thought he was very good as a rookie.
Yeah. I'm pulling up StatHead real quick because I was looking at
Mm-hmm.
Castle's highs for this season. Do you know what Steph Castle's high was for points this season? It was
34.
33 points. Yep.
Okay.
Rebounds? What's your guess?
I'm trying to remember just based on the blurbs I've written.
15.
Uh, okay. And I want to say
Assists?
assist was 14.
14. Well done.
Okay.
Steals?
That's got to be 5.
It was 3. Blocks? 2. So
Yeah.
the point
Okay.
there is that, and I'm sure that you could go, he played 81 games. So I'm sure that
Yeah,
in 81 games over the last couple of years, like, we will find a bunch of different guys who did that. But,
for
you
sure.
know, looking at, like, let's see what we got. So yeah, that's what I thought. So Steph Castle, I think he's in the top 10 for points, assists, and rebounds over the last 4 seasons as a rookie, like the highest total of points, assists, and
Mhm.
rebounds as a rookie. And that I wouldn't say that Steph Castle is going to be a volume guy, but he's so versatile and like actually a good basketball player that I'm just really excited to see how he fits in, even though obviously the fit with Fox isn't great. Hopefully Devin Vassell can, be like a 6'6" Zachary Risache, and actually have a decent shot. And if that's the case, then Castle might be able to squeeze in there. But I'm just I'm I just love Steph Castle, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see what that Spurs team looks like with Wimby and Fox and another year of him.
So as of right now, what would you say, like, who would you start for them? You have Fox, Wemby, obviously. Then who would the
Yep.
rest of your starting lineup be?
Would probably be
Actually, you have to go ahead and write in Harrison Barnes. You
yeah.
can't take Harrison Barnes
Honestly,
out.
Castle, Vassell, Barnes. I don't know who
Okay.
else.
I mean, I think
I
Sohan's there.
I feel like I'd rather. Yeah, I guess, but the only thing was starting Sohan. So you start Sohan. I guess you start Vassell at the two, Sohan, Barnes, Wimby. But I feel like I would rather have Castle out there as
Hmm.
more of a guard defender and have Vassell sort of play a little bit bigger as a three and force because if you have Sohan out there, okay, that's automatically a switch. Wemby's now being guarded by a four, Sohan's being guarded by
Right.
the five. I don't think you're really doing that with Castle because I think he can do I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Just
I
looking
like the
back,
Spurs.
they're going to be very good. This is probably not something that's going to continue next year, but in the games that they had, Fox and Wemby both healthy, they started Chris Paul, Vassell, and Harrison Barnes.
Hmm.
So I don't imagine that Chris Paul. I don't remember if his contract, if it was a 2-year deal or not, if he's actually guaranteed to come back or not. But I don't imagine that he would start again. I would imagine that he's coming off the bench because he'll be 40. But
It was
I
a
don't
one
know.
year.
Okay, so he might not even be back with San Antonio. Who knows?
He will be
That's
40 years
interesting.
old next season.
All right, I'm gonna choose the next one
Go for it.
because I have a guy's very well. I have a couple guys. So hold on, let me actually look at my list. Um,
So right up top, I'm just gonna say the disappointing guys were the guys that didn't play that much. Like Reed Shepard, Salon was disappointing because he was bad. Cody Williams was disappointing because he was bad.
that's
Topic didn't
Cody.
play, but
Cody
yeah,
Williams was the main guy that I was like, yeah, he was actually like pretty disappointing. But I think the idea was also he was going to be a long-term project.
yeah.
Shout out to Jason. We could talk about Dalton Connect, but we don't have to.
I'm
No,
good.
the main
Hornets legend.
guy that I think I was Hornets legend's crazy. That I had very low expectations for, was not very high on, that is now one of my favorite players from this class is Keyshawn George, which
Mm,
just shout out to everything the Wizards are doing because I absolutely love the team that they're building. But Keyshawn George, I think had a really fantastic rookie year. I don't know. Was he a guy that you were high on, or how did you feel about him entering the draft?
I didn't know very much about him, but he definitely fit my archetype of big toolsy wing slash forward that may or may not be able to shoot, and he's played that out in the NBA.
Yeah.
He's just a basketball player. I really like him. I think he's he's just one of those guys that every team wants. And then when you have him, it's like, oh man, I wish he'd do a little bit more. I wish he shot a little bit better. But then he does a whole bunch of other good stuff, and that's just a perfect. Like I think that that's just a perfect late first draft pick. Honestly, like
Hmm.
just get a decent basketball player, and I think that they've for sure got that. I don't know if he's a starter. I don't know how he fits in with Bub and yeah, I guess Jordan Poole is probably still there. Then you got Bilal and Sar, and like there's a lot of funkiness going on there, and so maybe Keyshawn just fits right in. But where did you have him, and what were your expectations for him coming in for the season?
Oh, man, I want to say I had him outside of like a first rounder.
Mm,
I was very low because I was in my mind. It was okay. He can shoot for sure.
yeah,
That was like what it was. That's what he was going to make his money on. But I didn't really see how much he'd be able to do like pretty much anywhere else. I wasn't
yeah,
really a believer in it. And then I guess second half of the season, as like a full-time starter. He had a couple games, like a lot of 3 steal games. He had a 5 block game. He had a one
Yeah.
game here, 12 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks, 2 threes. Like a bunch of games like that where it was a bunch of defensive stats, a bunch of threes. The
Yeah.
shooting percentage was abysmal over the course of the season. I mean,
Yes.
37.2% over the course of the season. It's very bad. But I think he came in as a shooter. Like I'm not
Hmm.
expecting him to be that bad. Like he'll
Yeah.
figure that out. So I think the fact that he was able to show some okay playmaking at times, then a lot of defensive production. I think he's a player that I'm excited about his future just in general, but specifically for fantasy. I think there's a couple of players. I mean, actually, the first two that we talked about have upside to be I guess
Yeah.
for Shea, I think we can be like a really high upside starter. Stephon Castle probably has more of that all-star upside, but I don't know if he'll get there. But neither's game translates directly to a category fantasy league. Whereas Keyshawn George, what he showed during his rookie year, I'm far more optimistic about.
If that shot ever comes back around to what it was in college,
Hmm.
because I was looking at his NBA stats for that, where it was like 37, 32, 75 splits. Like that's my kind of guy. Um, uh, Actually, a little bit low on the field goal percentage, but if his shot can come around and he can still end up at like a you know 11, 5, 3, 1 and 1, like that's like Nico Batum type
Yeah.
output. And if that efficiency comes around, that's just a extremely valuable player that is going to end up, especially if the Wizards end up being bad next year. Like, let's say they get a Dylan Harper in the
If
draft, and so now they've got um, a couple guards, and they just need some wings out there to do a bunch of stuff. Bilal and Keyshawn George running around is going to be crazy.
Yeah, I think he's in a really good situation for him to figure out his shot. He doesn't
Yeah,
need to hit shots for probably 2 to 3 more years. But I really do like what they're building, and I think they're going to end up being a very dangerous team when they finally have everybody old enough that they're able to compete. So,
yeah, yeah.
all right, you can either talk more about Keyshawn George, or you can steer us in our next direction. Up to you, or you can do
Let
both.
let's stay in Washington. Let's talk Bub. How'd you
Let's
feel
do it.
about Bub's season?
Oh my goodness.
Because I mean, personally, I want the Wizards to win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes just because of that shot that Bub hit. I don't want that to be a negative, but I feel like this is a guy who how do you how can you possibly evaluate this season with that context? It's like him and Sar together are kind of in a similar boat of like you had to play with Kuzma and Jordan Poole and sometimes Malcolm Brogdon and sometimes Marcus Smart, and I just holy crap, like I just can't even imagine what that must have done to somebody's basketball like psyche. I don't know. How'd you feel about Bub this season?
I was, I mean, I think he's one of those guys who was a late riser, kind of
Yep.
entering the draft, and then ended up going to the lottery. Um, he had a lot of flashes throughout the year, and then I think really ended the year strong. He
Mm,
had that 32-point game against Orlando beginning of April. Obviously, you mentioned ending on that game-winning shot, which shout out to ethical tanking. I mean, that's the way you do it. You play all
yes,
your
sir.
young guys all year long, as opposed to we're gonna just stop playing our good players like the Utah Jazz and other teams do. I think you mentioned Kuzma and Jordan Poole. I think on the court, both those guys obviously take away a lot from what the other rookies needed, like their touches to develop. But I think
Yeah.
off the court, Jordan Poole is actually like a really good player
Yeah.
for them to be around. Whereas Kuzma, I'm very glad that he's out of there. And I think bringing in guys like Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton, like those
Yeah.
veterans. I saw a quote earlier about Marcus Smart talking with Alex Sarr about like
Mm,
him developing his mentality to a point where
mm,
he's a star. It's like those are the kind of vets you need. So shout out to
yeah.
Marcus Smart for also taking on that responsibility to kind of put the team first when he
Yeah.
was sent to like a tanking situation. But as far as getting back on track to Bub Carrington, I think he's got both in fantasy and in real life like a very exciting game. From
Mm,
what I remember, he had a first game of college, he put up a triple double, and then he also had a triple double. No, maybe he didn't have a triple double this year. I thought he did. He came close one of his first few games, but really well-rounded production. But then
Mm,
I think he does have the upside to kind of be their point guard of the future. But if you mentioned, or as you mentioned earlier, if they were to not get the number one overall pick, they stick at number two, get Dylan Harper. That probably
yeah,
changes how things look for Bub Carrington. I think a lot of the guys from this past class, there's not many franchise players. There probably isn't any franchise players. So in a class now upcoming where you have, I'd say bare minimum two, but a few other guys that have that kind of upside,
yeah.
automatically a lot of these guys can get just totally bumped out of prime minutes.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's looking at the top picks from this last year and then looking at who has top picks this year. All right, so Utah, Cody Williams, you're not making any decisions based on Cody Williams. Washington,
Yeah.
you're you're not making any decisions off of Carrington. You might not even make decisions on Tsar. Like, you probably consider it, but like, there's not a player that really matches up with, like, would take away from Sar, so you're not really that worried about it.
Right.
Charlotte, you're not making decisions off of Salon. You are off of Miller.
Yeah.
And then like New Orleans, Philly, Brooklyn, Toronto, San Antonio. Like, if San Antonio jumps up, are you not taking Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe because of Steph Castle? I don't know. I don't
Probably
know what you
not.
would do there. And so I like really one of the only situations I can see at the top of a team maybe making like leaning one way or another because of that position. Like, is it just the Wizards with Sar? Because the Hawks, like Reese Shea, at least, on the wing as a forward, that's a little bit different than somebody small like Bub. But there's really nobody in this draft that should feel great about heading into this draft class, being like, oh, I'm secure. So how do you project that from dynasty perspective?
I mean, it definitely throws a pretty big wrinkle in there. I'm looking to the teams that are just in the lottery at all.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, the only other rookie I would say that maybe you'd consider is like not even necessarily safe, but just like maybe they won't draft a position because of him is Jared McCain. But like if Philly hops up to two and Dylan Harper's there, like I don't think
yeah,
you pass on Dylan Harper just because Jared McCain had a really nice 3 weeks or so. Even
no.
if I'm very excited about Jared McCain's future, I'm excited for him to be healthy. But yeah, no, most of these guys that were drafted this past season, they're not, I guess, gonna alter a team's draft decision. And with Sar, the only player, because I mean, Sar has said he wants to play power forward, but he's going to be center. Like he was
Yeah,
center this year, which
yeah,
was that whole situation was very strange. But like, if he wants to play power forward, you don't not take Cooper Flag because Alex Sar wants to play power
no,
forward. Like that's not how
no.
that works. So it definitely makes everybody kind of like, yeah, there was, I thought, a lot of different rookies. Like you said at the beginning, like we probably had pretty low expectations, and that's why everybody seemed to kind of be impressive. But I thought there was a
Mhm.
lot of different rookies that showed a lot of different flashes that have me excited about what they can be. And I know not all of them are going to pan out, but overall with this class, I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was, I think, entering it.
I think the guys that showed the most flashes were kind of in the second half of the draft
Yeah.
between Ware, McCain, Jacoby Walter, Tyson, Misi, AJ Johnson in Washington
Yeah.
somehow.
Yep.
Uh, you know, and then obviously Dunn, Collier, and Shireman. Like, those are all like actual rotation players. That's 10 out of 15 guys that are legit
Yep.
good. And we already talked about George. Daddy, like, I don't, Terrence
And then you have
Shannon,
the
I
second
really liked him.
rounders. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
Mobo, Filipowski, and
Yep.
Jalen Wells, who actually is going to have a case to win Rookie of the Year.
Yep. Furphy's dominated the last two games. For you got Oso, Bona.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really interesting players, and I think I remember saying that it was probably like January of last year. Is like, if everybody's out on the draft, I would be trying to acquire as many mid to late firsts as I possibly can, because that's where all of the good players are going to be. People just think the draft doesn't have the top end talent, and I feel like that played out darn near word for word. It's terms of like, hey, there's going to be 30 NBA rotation players, maybe one star in the 60 players, and you just got to figure out who's who. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I think it was maybe I don't remember who said it first, but it was like a really good draft to fill out your roster, but not to get your franchise player, which I
Yeah,
think probably need to include that evaluation into every single player's like dynasty value
yeah,
moving forward. Because like
yeah,
Bub Carrington, I think like he's just on the screen right now, but he's a player that has that type of I guess game where you're like okay, like he has star upside, but and I think he was very good as a rookie, so maybe he does. Um, but he could also just be like a sixth man. Like that's
I-
very realistic if
is he
they
just Cole
draft somebody
Anthony?
else. Is he just Cole Anthony? I think he's well, no, Cole Anthony definitely
I
does
mean,
some
like,
things that
cause
you don't expect him to do.
I'm gonna go look. I'm gonna look back. Cole Anthony's draft. Do you know when it was? I think it was
2020.
2020. Okay. The only reason I say Cole Anthony, and that's not as disrespect to him, but I mean, like in the 2020 draft for Orlando, they took Cole Anthony. And then what did the Orlando Magic do after that? Didn't they take Suggs 2 years later?
The next year.
1 year later? Yeah, that's
Hold
more
on.
of what I
Cole
mean.
Anthony must have been was he
It's
actually
2020.
2020?
Yeah, 2020.
Okay. Yeah, Suggs was 2021.
So I that's more of what I mean. Is like, oh yeah, Cole Anthony coming out of Cole Anthony's rookie season. It's like, oh, he's all right. He's not. He's nice. He's fine. But then if there's another chance to draft somebody, they're going to do it. There's literally no reason not to. And so uh, again, I don't mean that as a slight. Just more, what are you gonna do? Is he end up as a backup? Probably. But does that speak poorly on him as a player? Probably not.
Yeah. There's another guy that we can pivot to talk about that's
Okay.
actually probably in a very similar situation
Yeah.
where his team could get a point guard.
Mm.
Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if Utah's picking Dylan Harper number 2, I'm sorry, Isaiah Collier. Like he was incredible at getting assists, like a
Yep.
very valuable fantasy player in year 1, which is hard to do for a guard.
Mm.
But if they draft Dylan Harper, like he's getting pushed out. I mean, they drafted Keontae George the year before, and obviously they got Collier very, very late in the draft, like late
Mhm.
first round. So it's a little bit different, but they're already very, I mean, you could say they have a number of players at every position. So nobody's really safe because they're just going to take best player available.
Yeah. I mean, looking, it kind of depends on how they feel about Sexton, which it's just crazy to say. It just seems like they don't intend to trade him. It seems I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but yeah, Collier it was absolutely fantastic. I know that Jason has him basically everywhere, and I thought that that was probably the steal of the draft,
Yeah.
just because he's not like he's 6'3". That's not small. Like he was a I don't know. I really liked him. I'm curious to see what he can end up doing if he doesn't get to just run everything. Like if they get somebody else. And obviously he was playing with Sexton a little bit. Not not too bad there, and then with Clarkson a little bit too. But I don't know how you how do you evaluate Collier other than seeing that he can play in the NBA. Full stop. But is he gonna run your offense? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. He's such a excellent player to watch. Loved his season. I just don't know what you do with him if you are if you roster him because it's like
Yeah.
do you just roll with it? It's like, oh, he's a starter. Like, well, maybe.
I think it just makes Utah as a team very difficult to evaluate
Yeah.
just because, like, I mean, it's the difference between them and the Wizards. I mean, going back to your point about wanting the Wizards to get Cooper Flag simply because they kind of deserve it for tanking properly as opposed to Utah. Like, if they're playing their full healthy roster and trying to win games, they're not the worst team in the league. They're nowhere close. They're closer to a playoff team. But, you know, how do you bake into your evaluation that even if Utah gets Cooper Flag, they're probably going to tank again because,
Hmm.
what's better than Cooper Flag? I mean, Cooper Flag and Cam Boozer. It's what's
Yeah.
better. Cooper
Yep.
Flag and AJ DeBonta, because then that's
Yep.
a BYU guy right there too. So it's
Mm,
very, very difficult for me to imagine Utah competing next year. So you might get another year, maybe not in
yeah.
October or November, but like you might get a January to March or April stretch of Isaiah Collier with really good production.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to evaluate them as a team just because when are they going to try and win games? I don't know.
Yeah. I have no idea, but you, you mentioned that the Wizards kind of deserved it, and so I got thinking. I was like, I wonder what the Wizards' winning percentage was, not last year, but the year before, where they weren't like trying to be the worst team in the entire NBA. Do you know the Wizards' winning percentage in 22-23 with Bradley Beal was 43%? Do you happen to know what the Phoenix Suns' win percentage this year is with Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker? It's 43.9%. So we can say without a doubt that Bradley Beal is a 43% win, win, win
Gosh,
percentage kind of player, and that is why the Washington Wizards deserve Cooper Flag for dealing with that forever.
that's great. That's the kind of analysis we need.
Two straight
Oh my
years,
gosh,
43% wins, 35 and 47, 2 years in a row. Nuts.
that's insane. Um, yeah, we'll see what happens with the actual lottery, but I don't know. Looking at it here, we'll do this real quick. Unless is there any, well, we'll just go ahead and pivot.
Let's go for it.
Let's do this, pull this up so we can see who are we. I mean, is there a team that you feel like outside of Washington, quote unquote, deserves the number one pick?
Um, I wouldn't. Brooklyn, kinda. Not New
Yeah,
Orleans, not Philly. That's all I care about. Not New
yeah.
Orleans, not Philly.
I feel like both of them just have such terrible injury luck. This year was atrocious, which is why they're picking where they are. But I'd feel better about New Orleans than Philly.
Yes, but y'all got Zion, and
Um,
you still don't know what to do with him. So you don't get another one.
well, he's yeah, that's true because they went from Anthony Davis to Zion to
Yeah,
Cooper Flag. That would be.
that'd be
I
quite
don't
the run.
want. I don't want to see Miami or Dallas hop up.
No,
That would be. I don't want to see San Antonio simply because that would be unfair. I want to
San
enjoy.
Antonio, OKC for the next 10 years of Wemby, Cooper versus oh my gosh, that'd be nuts.
I mean, they have because they have the Hawks pick this year,
Uh
so
huh.
like that could by the time this comes out, we'll know, but could be a
Yep.
lottery pick. But then they
Yep.
also have the swap in 2026, which
Yep.
I don't expect the Hawks to be in the lottery next year, but like things could happen.
Hmm.
Like we've seen, nobody expected Philly to be in the lottery this year. Injuries
Yeah.
happen, so I mean, there could be another chance for San Antonio even to make the postseason. And yeah, so I don't even want the idea of them not only getting Cooper Flag, but then also potentially having a chance to add Darren Peterson to the mix too. That would be because then it's like, why do you enjoy, like, why do you support your team? Why do you hope your team wins? I hope my team trades away all their first round picks for the next 15 years and all their players and just starts accumulating for the 2040s, 2050s.
Yeah. Dallas should also not like the NBA
Agreed.
should just leave them where they are. Like I don't even put your ping pong balls in there. I don't care.
Yeah,
If if they move up at all after the Luka, like there's just no way.
no way.
Um, out Toronto doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like even if they got Cooper Flag, I just feel like they would end up doing the same thing that they've been doing, which is just running around with a bunch of overplayed players and then trading them away so that they can get upcoming restricted free agents and then overpay them too for being the exact same player archetype, but worse.
It's a
Um,
very specific business model you have.
yeah, yeah, why go from Fred Van Vliet, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby at max money when you could go to Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, and Brandon Ingram at max money? Why, you know?
Why do
You
it?
might as well. Houston jumping up at all would be with the Phoenix pick would be pretty unbelievable though too. So I don't know if there's
Yeah.
any. I don't know.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I kind of want to see the chaos of Charlotte being in position to take Harper and just the ripple effects of that. Like, do you play LaMelo, Harper, Miller, or do you
Yeah.
start looking at moving LaMelo because you've got Dylan Harper? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's
I
what's
want
your?
to see. I want to see Charlotte just because it's a 2 hour drive for me. So I would
That's
love for
fair.
Cooper Flag to be 2 hours away. That's my reasoning.
That's fair. Is the Sacramento pick that the Hawks have protected at all?
It's top 12 protected. So
Oh,
I
okay,
really
gotcha.
want it to be right there, 13,
Yeah.
14.
So
My
don't jump up.
late
Yeah.
right. My late season hope was that the Lakers would lose their last 5 games, barely hop
Mm.
into the lottery, and then hop up to number one because the Hawks had the Lakers pick.
Ah, that would be something. The Lakers would have
But it didn't
deserved
happen.
that though, for getting Luca for
Exactly.
nothing.
Yeah. One more question before we end.
Okay.
Your draft, startup dynasty draft right now.
Yeah.
Where are you taking Cooper Flag?
I probably I wouldn't have a chance to take him because I feel like there's too many players in the league right now who are already top like first round fantasy assets in the NBA at under 25. But I wouldn't be surprised if Cooper Flag was top 10, like top 15 at the very latest. Just because people can't help themselves, but he also might warrant it. So
Yeah.
can't really fault him too much.
I'll give you a couple of hypotheticals of
Okay.
players of who you'd rather have. Um, LaMelo Ball or Cooper Flag.
Flag, actually.
Okay. Um,
I don't
Alperen
trust
Şengün.
LaMelo
Oh, sorry. Go
to
ahead.
stay healthy.
That's
So
fair.
that's what that
Okay.
is.
Alperen Şengün or Cooper Flag.
Uh, Probably Shingun.
Okay. Um, Jalen Williams or Cooper Flag.
J Dub.
Okay. That's an interesting one. So LaMelo's way lower down on your board, I think, than maybe he is on mine.
Way lower in like the scale of where they are on the board between like from that 10 to 15 range versus that
Mm-hmm.
15 to 25 range. Like, yeah, that's a
Okay.
numbers aren't that big, but that's a pretty big gap.
I'll do one more. Scotty Barnes or Cooper Flag.
Cooper Flag.
Okay.
I think that's
It's going to be, yeah.
that's the cutoff.
And then if he goes to Toronto, that just makes everything really interesting, doesn't it?
If they run back with Project 6ix9ine again with worse players this time, except obviously, I think Scotty and Cooper are probably better than
Yeah.
OG and Siakam at some point, but it's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Crazy offseason.
Yeah. It'll be a fun one. Rhett, what work do you have coming up that we should be on the lookout for?
I have got some things that are happening that are different than anything else I've put out, but I'm being very diligent about what it is that I put out because I'm I'm trying to be careful with what comes out about it. So
Hmm.
you can just follow me on Twitter at Rhett_Bauer and just be around because it should. I don't want to say that it's coming soon because then I have to hold myself to that, but um, progress is being made. That's for sure.
That's good to hear. As he said, you can follow him at Rhett_Bauer on Twitter to stay up to date. So when the massive project drops, TBD, we'll all be able to tune in for it and check it out. Rhett, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Noah.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. And I will see you next time.